I always tell people, if you ever have a booger stuck in your nose and you just kind of feel like you're not breathing as well, I'm taking the boogers out of here.
You heard correct. Tim said we're going to take the boogers out of the ports of the Y Block poor man's G head that he's making out of the ECZ-G 1955 model year Y Block Ford V8 and Mercury head. So
The poor man's G head.
this is part two of this really short and brief buildup of a Y Block head, and as Tim has told us, what he's building is a poor man's G head. Now, what I've done in this video is I've let everything run. I didn't edit out a whole lot. I know it's 30 minutes long, and of course, from what we saw in the views just yesterday with the first video that we uploaded, there's a lot of interest from the Y Block crowd in building a poor man's G head and basically taking what would be a 55 model year 1.78 intakes to 1.92 intake valve. And Tim, of course, does great work on this. We're all getting to stage one porting here in just a little bit. But what I'm going to do is just let the video run. There'll be with some commentary, different times. Tim's going to pop in and say some things. I might add some things as well just to help it along. So if you want to scroll through or see the process, that's fine.
We get sand go a little bit higher.
What Tim is using is a can of spray graphite, and he's going to put that on the face of the valve and just test to see where that face of the valve is meeting up with the seat. And he explains it here for us in detail.
That's about where I want it. Not quite centered, just a little bit higher than center. Now the real test. Drop that guy down in there. Watch that gauge right there. I think we got a pretty good seal. Not bad at all. And that's with no spring on it. So now that I got my cutter height set, okay, so when cutting these things, you're using your senses. There's sight, sound, and feel. I can feel vibration through this. If it starts to chatter, you can hear the tone of the cutter change. You hear when it starts to get that high squeal. That means it's work hardening, so you back off and you go back down again. There's a lot of backing off and going back down and cutting. So you end up with a real nice looking seat there. Let me ask you, Daniel, are you satisfied?
I apologize. At this point, I cut off the video because I thought Tim was asking me a personal question, but I think he wanted this recorded. So just to explain, he asked the question, are you satisfied with what you see? And when I took a look at the ports in there and just kind of looking at what was going on after the seats had been cut, you could tell where there was extra material that needed to be taken out. So what happens next is Tim kind of changes out the cutters there that he's got on his machine, and he's going to go ahead and take out that extra material. So you kind of see a little bit of a lip there. So each one, exhaust and intake alike, he's taken out as much as he can before he actually does the rest of the port work with the burr and the die grinder.
That's 70 degrees. Now that last angle down there at the bottom, that's 60 degrees, if you don't count the 90 at the bottom. But this is 70 degrees, so it's 10 degrees different than that bottom angle. Well, I'm going to set this up, I'm going to go down there, and we're going to clean all this. What I do is I go down and I watch it, and I can see where that 70 is hitting the 60, and I'll usually take it right up to the edge of the 45, so now it's kind of like a 4-angle valve job. But it cleans that edge up in there, yeah. And before this is all done, I will go in there with a die grinder and a burr and smooth it out. I like everything smooth transitions and radius. I don't like that little
wedges out of there, yeah.
And believe me, I do that to every head. Not just Y blocks, not just Y blocks for customers that want a little extra flow. It doesn't take that much time, and it just makes a nicer job of it.
Tim, does it stand to reason that obviously getting the ledges out help with airflow, but does it also a deal where that could be a hot spot right there as well?
Too, yeah. It wouldn't do anything like cause detonation, but it's nice to get that stuff out of there. Whenever I explain it in layman's terms, I always tell people, you ever have a booger stuck in your nose and you just kind of feel like you're not breathing as well? Well, I'm taking the boogers out of here.
There you go.
Okay, so other than our final cleanup here,
Yeah.
those seats, the exhaust seats are done. Now get a good look at that intake port, the seat and the throat. Back out, yeah, just kind of line up with the guide and back out so you get a good idea of what it looks like. Okay, so these are cut for 178 valves, and we're gonna set them up for 192s. Pretty close, but I'd like to see a little bit higher, but it's almost right on the money. And you can see that how everything kind of clears up as we get to the seat. And you'll see all three angles start. You've got the 60, the 45, and the 30 on the top. I don't know if you noticed that cast iron cuts a lot easier than those
It sure does.
steel seats.
You can hear it too, you know.
I do want to give one little reminder here, and it's a bit of a warning, but at any rate, just be sure that if you have your exhaust or intake valve seat finished and you go in to do any port work, protect your seats. That is so important. If you've got that burr or that die grinder going, you can very quickly mess up any kind of work done at the machine shop. Take your time, be patient. Tim has obviously got a very steady hand here. He's done this thousands of times. He knows what he's doing. He's very experienced. At home, this is the kind of port work that you can do for sure. Just be careful and don't damage that seat.
support job.
Stage one. It still takes some time, but you get a lot of bang for your buck out of that one.
So kind of the same process so you started with those C1 TE heads on the 292 for the truck when you initially ran it, right?
Yep. But the thing about the C1 TE heads or COAE heads, about the same thing. The chambers aren't quite big enough to put a 192 valve in. So I have done either 1/7/8, they're normally 1/6/2. I can put 1/7/8 in those, or I have put a 185, like a Windsor valve, but the valve key's in a different location, so it takes a special combination of retainers and valve keepers to get the installed height right. It's a lot, and you don't get that much more over 1/7/8 and 185, so I've pretty much gone to just 185s when I modify those heads, or excuse me, 1/7/8. Yeah. So let's go over here. I have a before and after. If you want to, you can get in there and polish that up, but when you run your finger around it, the important part is just everything is radius and smooth. There's no sharp edges where the air has to like jump a corner. You want a nice smooth transition. Right. And believe me, polishing those to a mirror finish really doesn't help. It's better to have it a little rough, because it keeps things suspended as it's flowing through. It keeps the air and fuel mixture mixed.
I have to apologize to you. The day that I was up there, Tim had my block on the milling machine, and we didn't have the opportunity to take this head and put it on the milling machine and show you what goes on. Of course, if you're building a poor man's G head, one of the easiest ways to raise compression on this head, or any head really, is to mill the surface, mill the deck of the head.
You know, the bigger you go, you lose velocity at lower RPM. So 192s or 194s, if you're running Chevy valves in them, that's really as big as you want to go. You know, everybody loves to say that 202 sound, but there's really not a lot of advantage to it. So, and you know, these heads, they will flow, they will turn 7,000 RPM if you can feed it enough. And you know, on the right lower end, camshaft, cubic inches, you know, you can make 350, 400 horsepower with them. Again, before I got John Mummert's aluminum heads, cast iron was all we had to work with. And although John's heads are very nice heads, they cost money. And if you're willing to put in a little time on these, you can make iron heads run real well. And that's all they had in the old days anyway. The poor man's G head.
Well, guys, that's a wrap here. Hanford, California, Hanford Auto Supply Machine, and Tim McMaster, the Y Block guy, showing us how to get it done in the shop. Thank you for joining us today, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Click the notification button. All kinds of great Y Block material and content here on the channel. While you're at it, go ahead and hop on over to Tim's channel, Y Block Guy. I'll leave a link in the description below. You can check that out. Got any questions, you can shoot them here in the comments below, or maybe hit me up with an email, dan.jessup@hotrodreverend.com, and I will do what we can to help you. As many of you know, I am not just a gearhead and a DIY guy like many of us in the shop. I'm also a preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yeah, I've got Hot Rod and Reverend in the name, and boy, they just mesh right together. Visit hotrodreverend.com, find out why I have that name, a little bit of a bio there, and then also the presentation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I want to encourage you to tune in each week, Wednesdays in the Word. We have that, just a brief Bible study for everybody. That's been growing as well. Thank you for you guys that have been checking that out. And then check out the playlist that we have here on the channel. all kinds of content for you, be a big help to your project.